let's kick off. And of course, today we're talking about using analytics to improve your form conversion rates. So specifically, which metrics should you be looking at to identify user friction? But I always like to start off my sessions. Just a quick question. Put your hand up if you enjoy filling in forms. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm assuming because of the delay, I'm not going to get many hands up. But usually when I ask this in a crowd, there's maybe one person in 100. Most people don't like filling in forms. They fill in forms to get what the form promises them. And that's always a key thing to bear in mind when you're designing and forms and asking people to give you information. And people don't like filling in forms, and specifically because they've had bad experiences. They've come across forms like this one here. You can see this beauty with a big long form and a nice juicy capture at the bottom to frustrate them some more. Or perhaps they've seen a form like this with a drop down that's huge, and you've got to scroll through a list of titles if you want to call yourself Reverend Mother or Wing Commander or Viscount. Hey, who's got time for that? Who's going to stick around for that? So obviously we look at these and laugh and go, oh, it's a bad form. Obviously people are going to drop out, but do we truly know that? How do we know that? And that's where, obviously, as we would say, that's where analytics come in. You need to use the data to understand the scale of any user issues and specifically where they're happening. And so we're going to be talking about that today. Going to split it into two parts. One basic part first, the base metrics that act as a great starting point, and then some more advanced metrics for you to go into. But firstly, why should you listen to me? You know, what do I know about forms? So I'm Alan, I'm Managing Director of Zuko. We're a form analytics platform that's been going for 10 years now. We use data, well, we provide data and help analyze forms to identify issues, fix issues. So we've been doing this for 10 years. We've seen pretty much every form issue there is. We've quantified it. So we know a lot about forms, and that's why I'm sharing some of the benefits of our wisdom that we've accumulated over the years here today. So firstly, as I say, the building blocks, what do we find here? So first metric you probably want to look at is the most obvious, and that's abandonment. And what I mean by that is the last interaction on a form before someone leaves and doesn't come back. So that triggers an abandonment. Now, often the starting point that people want to look at is just sheer volume. You know, where are people dropping off? And we've got our sort of table of examples here of 4 different fields, the number of sessions that interacted with this field, and the abandonment count. So that's essentially the volume of people who dropped off at that point. And so in this case, you can look at title and go, ooh, we really want to hit title. And obviously that's important because obviously the higher the volume of abandonment, the better it is if you can improve it, more scope for improvement. So you do want to look at that. But what I would also say is you always need to look at abandonment rate as well. And so what you do there is essentially look at the percentage of people who abandoned at that point out divided by the total number of people who interacted. So it's just taking into account people who interact. And so on our example here, we've got the age check field. We can see the total abandonment count is 250, so it's less than half of the title field. However, the abandonment rate is high, so 45% of people who interact with that field drop off on it. So therefore, you want to have a look at this in terms of propensity as well as sheer volume. And we also see that kind of with the email field here as well, which has a higher abandonment rate than title. Why is that important? It's important because obviously not everyone sees every part of a form. Couple of reasons for this. You know, firstly, you may have conditional questions. Just a little video here that shows you on a form where you answer one question and it shows you a different one. So not everyone's going to take the same pathway. So a significant proportion of people might not even see a particular question. So that's why you need to look at percentages as well as absolutes. The other reason is pretty much applies to pretty much every form, and that's that people can only drop out once from a form. And people who drop out at the start of a form, which they often do, obviously can't drop out to the bottom. So fields later on in the form might have a lower overall abandonment volume. However, you've still got to look at the percentage, because even if you're driving more people to them, if they've got a poor percentage abandonment rate, then that's not great. So you need to look at the percentages there as well. So that's abandonment, which is the first basic pattern. Second one is error messages. Which error messages are triggering? So what you want to look at is, okay, not necessarily whether the error messages are good or bad at this stage, that's a whole different presentation, but more, which ones are triggering, when are they triggering? Because obviously errors are an indication that someone's got something wrong, so you can see where people are struggling on your form. What you do need to be careful of, obviously, is to check whether they're related to abandonment or not. And I've got an example here, bit of a Zuko graph. So what we got here is error messages and the amount of times they occur in the bar. So the first one, if we look at the first error message here, is please select the sign agreement tick box. You can see overall this is the error that occurs the most. So you might think, okay, this is where I need to focus. However, when we break that down and just look at people who don't successfully complete the form, so people who abandon, that's the orange bar, and we can see that actually there's other error messages which are more important. So card number is required. This is not a valid card number. So you can see in aggregate, error messages around the card number are much more prevalent in cases where people abandon than just a tick box, which, to be honest, people probably say, oh, I just missed the tick box. They go back and they can fix the error very quickly, versus cards, which is more difficult. So always break it down to check your abandonment figure as well. Other things to look at are field returns or corrections. So what I mean by this is, so people entering information into a field, moving on, but then coming back and making a change, typically a correction driven by an error message. This is a great indicator of frustration or friction, people having to go back, they've got it wrong as well. However, you do need to be a little bit careful as to, is this causing abandonment or not? And one of the more advanced techniques I'll take you through will show you how to do that. And then the final metric really is time spent, which is similar, rule of thumb, that the more time people spend on a field, the more frustrating it is for them. And so the more friction there is. But you do need to be a little bit careful. I'll just show you an example here. So in this case, we've got two questions. One is a name question. One is a 1,000-word essay question, essentially. And you would naturally expect the second one to be much, much longer in terms of time spent on it. Doesn't mean there's necessarily friction there. And again, when we come to one of the more advanced techniques, you'll see how you can identify and break that out. So that's the basics numbers. All I'll go through now is more advanced stuff, which can be very useful in pinpointing where the true issues are on your form. The first thing I'd like to talk about, what you should always do on a form, is segment behavior by the cohort of people who complete your form and the cohort of people who abandon the form. Those two, if you find a behavior difference between those two, often that'll show you where your problems are. And you can do this with various metrics. I typically use sessions returned, like we talked about, but you can use time spent as well, because you might see what's going on there. And so to give you an example, what we've got here is, again, 4 fields. And the first bit is the percentage of sessions returned. So the percentage of sessions where someone has to go back and make a correction and make a change. But what we've done is split them out between abandoners and completers. So if we would just look at the raw numbers, you'd probably look at email and go, oh, it's probably about 55% of people who are having to go back to the email address to fix. Oh, that's bad. And of course, yeah, you don't want that to be high. But when you look at the difference between those who abandon and those who complete, it's relatively small. So is it driving abandonment? If you compare that to the phone number field here, this is where you see the difference. So you can see that 25% of people who abandon go back and make a change to the phone number field. That's only 17% of people who complete. So the behavior difference there is 8 percentage points. And so that's where you start to think, oh, okay, so not only is this a point of friction, it's a point of friction that's likely related to abandonment. So I need to go there and focus my hypotheses on the phone number field there. If you look at the time spent as well, you can see a similar pattern, 16 seconds for abandon and 10 seconds for those who complete. So that's where, as I mentioned before, that's where you can kind of break it out and use more advanced techniques to say, okay, there's a problem here and it's related to abandonment. So let's look into it. What is it causing the issue for those who abandon? The second technique I'd like to talk about is what happens after failed submissions. So people who go through your form, complete it, click the submit button, are typically people you want to complete. You know, they've spent a lot of time giving you their precious information, they're ready to pay you, but yet they don't complete your form. Something went wrong. What's going on there? You're losing people. It's money being left on the table. So you often want to look at metrics related to failed submissions and what happens next. So how do you do that? Well, hopefully your analytics tool, plug for Zuko, obviously, will show you that and give you something like this, which is an example of the things you can find in Zuko as to what happens next. So here, what we've done is we've taken a cohort of people who abandon the form, they're not successful in completing. What happens after submit button? So essentially a failed submit. So we've got a little Sankey chart, submit button on the left. On the right hand side, okay, well, 42% of people abandon straight away. Probably they've seen the error messages, gone, I'm dropping out. So obviously that's not great. We might not be able to get so much information out of those, but what we do see is the next two fields, so set password and phone number. So they're pretty big as well. So what's happening is people are clicking submit, they're jumping back to try and fix something, and we can see they're going to the password and phone number fields, they're trying to fix it. But also we know with these people, they don't successfully complete because we've done a segmentation. So we know that they're struggling to complete these and then they abandon. So this is a very quick and easy way to find out where people are struggling on your forms. So probably my favorite reports. And basically it'll quickly show you where they're struggling, they're jumping back, they're trying to fix it, they can't, they drop out. In this case, it's the set password and the phone number fields. So I would then use this information to focus on those. What are the user issues? Develop hypotheses to improve. So great little report, that. And then the final thing I'd like to talk about is doing segmentation on a field level as well, not just on the form as a whole, but really drilling down on a field level for different audiences, because often what you'll see is an average dropout rate. May look good, may look bad, but actually what you need to do is drill down further and say, okay, is that, you know, is that for the whole of that particular audience, or is the floor of averages covering something up that I'm missing here? And to give you an example here from an e-commerce checkout, again, we've got the fields down the left, we've got the abandonment rate. So for all sessions, but then split out between mobile users and desktop users here. And the one I'd like to point out in particular is this gift voucher. So, you know, the voucher code, always an issue on a checkout. And what we can see is the abandonment rate, all sessions just under 21%. For mobile users, that's 22%. Desktop is much lower. So that's 15%. And so what you'd see here is, okay, it's the mobile usage that's driving up my abandonment rate. So I probably want to start here. What are the issues? Now, in the case of a gift voucher, often this is not uncommon. Gift vouchers, voucher codes, people very often just jump from the checkout to try and find one, which is much easier to do on a desktop browser. Mobile are much more likely to go, oh, I'm trying to find a code, I don't have it, okay, I'm leaving. And that's kind of what's happening here. But it is important to break this down to find out what's going on. So that's you know, essentially important to do, but you don't want to stop at the first level. And kind of what you want to do is look to go deeper. Here's an example, slightly separate example, but along the same lines of some data we were looking at recently on abandonment rates. So we were looking at device types. This was a buy button on e-commerce checkout. So what we see here is the abandonment rates, 18.5% for mobile and 5.8% for desktop. So again, oh my goodness, mobile, we need to focus there. But what you need to do is also then break that down further. So next level here, we were able to see that, oh, okay, well, iOS is 6.1%. That's pretty close to desktop. Maybe that's not a problem. Oh, Android, 35%, a third of people on Android drop off at that point. So again, that's where it takes you deeper. Okay, so no, I don't need to focus on iOS necessarily. Let's start looking at Android. You can obviously go further on this. You could do Android device. Is it a specific Android device? May well be. You may want to look at that. Is it a specific browser related to Android that people are using? So you could then split it out. And those are things that you can do within Zuko to really drill down and say, this is a cohort of users which are struggling on this particular question. let's look at the UX for that, and let's see if we've got hypotheses to improve it. So, okay, those are the main metrics. Those are, how things you need to look at. Hopefully that's useful. If you want more in-depth info, we've got a white paper on using data to optimize form. You can get that on the Zuko website. Easy enough to find, or use the link here. We've got a lot of data around forms if you're interested as well. So that essentially is the main metrics. I will ask for questions, but I'm conscious because of the delay, I'm probably not going to get many. So I'll wait for 30 seconds, a minute, and we'll round up. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or drop a comment later on, and I'll come and answer it.